Do you think that the way media talks about race is harming race relations?
I would not be able to generalize about media, because I don't think we can talk about the media as a single unit.
Right.
Because it's so diverse, the different sorts of perspectives. If you're just talking about newspapers, for example, there's so many different perspectives, intentional editorial perspectives that happen. And I think that some of the newspapers, especially the tabloids, aren't particularly helpful at all. They're not particularly useful because they tend to go for shock headline, shock content, clickbait even stuff, right? I think that's not very helpful. But if you look at some of the more detailed reporting that happens in like New York Times, for example, or in the Guardian, London Times, Wall Street Journal, these are newspapers that have political perspectives in some cases, but in a lot of the journalistic reporting, that doesn't shape it as much as as often gets portrayed. And the stuff that comes out of that reporting, the good reporting, the stuff that's properly has editorial oversight and the rigorous standards of evidence, all of that, I think that does help, because it raises questions about disparities or the lack thereof, where it happens and where it doesn't. If there's shoddy journalism, that doesn't help. That doesn't help anything. But good journalism does help. And if it's wrong and it gets corrected, that's how journalism works. Everyone makes mistakes. But I think that does help. I don't think it solves the problem at all. All it does is it provides the material that normal people in their everyday lives have to work with. They have to take it in, they have to think about it, they've got to talk about it with other people. And that's how understanding develops. And it's a long process. And I think one of the questions you asked earlier was something about why has there been a rise of sort of dissatisfaction in these narratives and stuff.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons for that is because there is I totally lost my train of thought. One of the reasons that there has been a rise in dissatisfaction, especially, for example, there have been surveys that have said, are race relations better or worse, etc. And in the last, say, 10 years, they all go up. Everything is worse now than it was. Right. And that's fed a narrative that's taken place, especially on the right as well, that talking about these things makes it worse.
Right.
I think that's fundamentally wrong. Right. I think I think what those polls show us is not that things are actually better, not that they're actually worse. They show us that we're more aware that there is an issue, and that is difficult, and that it creates discomfort, and that grappling with that makes it look like it's worse, but it's not worse. It's just more visible. It's more obvious. Right. It's more out in the open, which has the positive side effect of drawing attention to long-standing problems that have, up to that point, only been really talked about by those who it's affecting. Negative side effect is that it provides fodder for those who are at the margins, especially on the right, who can then take it and do terrible things with it, who can use this to feed their sense of grievance. And that's why, and I don't think you can stop that necessarily, that the radical right takes it up. I think what you can do is you can stop people legitimizing it. You can stop people in positions of authority giving credence to those sorts of things, and allowing them to spread their message as if it is a commonly held opinion, which in general, I don't think the views of the radical right, their real views, are widely held. However, I think many on the radical right think they are. Right. And when they have a leading politician who then parrots their language, it gives them more of that impression. It draws more attention to them. It makes them bolder. And I think that's where the danger really comes in.
So you think that the media is justified in trying to draw attention away? Because I think a lot of people on the right feel like they don't have a chance to actually air their views on mainstream media, which makes them then go onto social media and cast themselves as victims of the media. You think that's the right approach, as opposed to inviting them on to actually address?
I think it again depends on who you're talking about. If you're talking about the sort of the culture warriors at the end, who are at the margins of discourse, who aren't interested in conversation, who sort of demonize and denounce as opposed to engaging in critical conversation, I don't think the media has any responsibility to bring them into the conversation, because their job isn't to try to further our understanding and encourage debate and so on. Their they're bomb throwers, right? They're trying to
Well, what about
blow the
someone
things
like
up.
Tommy Robinson?
Absolutely not. No.
No.
Absolutely not. No. Tommy Robinson has
Do you
no
see
place.
him as somebody who isn't that really to speak for his people?
I think he does speak for some, undoubtedly.
Right.
And it's important that we know that Tommy Robinson's out there and that some people are attending his rallies. I think it's more important to know that more people protest by far than show up at his rallies. And I think in that sense we can contextualize it. I wouldn't let Tommy Robinson write an op-ed in my newspaper. I would report on Tommy Robinson,
Right.
but I wouldn't let him direct his views directly into it and have the credibility that comes along with that. That being said, if we move away from the far right into just conservative voices,
Yeah.
conservative, thoughtful voices, yes, by all means they should be, and I think there should be more conservative voices in The Guardian, for example.
Right, yes.
The New York Times has actually made a concerted effort to bring in more conservative voices over the past 15 years or so. And I very much enjoy reading David Brooks and Bret Stephens and Rouse Douthat. Their views I find stimulating. I disagree with them often, but I enjoy reading them because they're thoughtful commentators.
Right.
And after the most recent presidential election in the U.S., the New York Times, they looked back at their reporting over the election and tried to think, why did we not see these trends happening in areas like in Michigan or Wisconsin where Trump won? What did we miss? And they realized they hadn't been sending reporters to those places because it was inconvenient, expensive, and it challenged their presumptions. They hadn't thought about those things, so they started doing more. So there's been more coverage. And it's the same reason The Guardian's been sending people into Brexit country as well. The same sort of reasoning to go and make more of an effort to speak to people who feel disaffected, who feel left out of the narrative. Not to let Tommy Robinson speak for them,
Right.
but to go and talk directly to them and see what they think. Contextualize it, comment critically on it,
Yeah.
but nevertheless to make sure those voices are being reflected. Those voices are in The Guardian.